I've spent most of my life being the guy who keeps his head down and lets other people talk. You know the type. The one fixing things in the background, while someone in a nicer suit explains it to the room like it was their idea all along. I grew up in a town where your options were pretty much learn to work with your hands or learn to leave. I chose the first one. My parents didn't have money for college, so I went to a trade school. Apprenticed, learned to read blueprints before I could parallel park, and worked my way up the hard way. It was enough, or at least I thought it was, until the night a CEO's family looked at me across a table full of crystal glasses and white linen and decided I was low educated. Not just thought it, said it, loud enough for me to hear, loud enough for half the table to hear. I wasn't supposed to be there in the first place. The company gala was one of those events where the invitation says business formal, but everyone shows up trying to look like they're richer than they really are. I'm a project manager in operations for a construction and maintenance firm. I manage crews, budgets, timelines, permits. I'm decent at what I do, good enough that my name shows up in the key contributors slide at quarterly meetings. But the gala? That was for partners, executives, and people who use synergy without choking on it. My boss slid an invitation onto my desk 2 weeks before. "Put on a suit, Grant," he said. "The big guy likes that you actually deliver things. He'll want to see you there." The big guy was our CEO, Alan Mercer. Late 50s, old money, old school. He'd inherited the company from his father and somehow managed not to run it into the ground, which already puts him above a lot of second-generation owners I've seen. We'd only spoken twice, briefly, but he always remembered my name. That's a small thing that feels big when you grew up pouring concrete in borrowed boots. So I rented a tux instead of buying one, shined my one good pair of shoes, and tried not to look like a kid at his first wedding when I walked into the hotel ballroom. It was one of those places where the air itself feels expensive. Chandeliers, soft jazz, waiters gliding around with trays of drinks I couldn't pronounce. I found my name card at a round table near the center of the room, too close to the stage for my comfort, and immediately realized I was out of my depth. To my left, a partner from a law firm that bills more per hour than I made in a day 10 years ago. To my right, a woman with a last name I'd seen on at least 3 buildings downtown. Across from me, the CEO's son, Carter, and his wife, Lila. If you're picturing a glossy magazine cover couple, you're not far off. Carter had that permanent tan you only get if your job description includes networking on a golf course. Lila looked like she'd stepped out of an ad for champagne. Perfect hair, perfect teeth, perfect little laugh she used like punctuation. Her dress probably cost more than my truck. "Grant, right?" she asked as I sat down. "Yeah, nice to meet you," I said. "What do you do again?" Carter cut in, not unkindly, just like he was checking off a box. "Project manager, operations. I handle the city infrastructure contracts mostly. Water mains, roads, that kind of thing." He nodded in a way that told me he'd already stopped listening. Dinner started. Speeches, polite applause. The CFO talking about growth and margins like we weren't all thinking about dessert. I did what I usually do, ate quietly, listened, made the occasional small comment when someone asked. I was starting to relax. The wine helped. Then the conversation at our table shifted to schools. Not the "how are your kids doing" kind of talk. This was a game. Who went where, who donated what, who was on what board. Ivy League acronyms bounced around like confetti. "Columbia, class of '09, announced the lawyer to my left. "Stanford," said the woman with the building name last name. "My daughter's at Yale now, actually." "Harvard," Carter said, like there could be no other answer. "You know how it is. Family legacy." Lila laughed and touched his arm. "He means they would have disowned him if he went anywhere else." She turned her attention to me, finally, with that polite curiosity people wear when they're waiting for a punchline. "And you, Grant, where did you study?" Fork halfway to my mouth, I wiped my hand on the napkin and answered the same way I always do. "Community college for a year, then trades program, electrical and structural." There was a tiny pause, just half a second, but I felt it. "Oh," she said, not unkindly, not kindly either, just, "Oh." Carter smirked, took a sip of his wine. "So you're one of the practical ones," he said. "We need those. Somebody has to actually build the stuff we talk about." I smiled because I didn't know what else to do. "I'm good with that," I said. "Buildings don't care where you went to school. They just care if you know what you're doing." "Spoken like a man who's never seen a trust fund collapse," the lawyer joked. The table laughed. I chuckled too, because that's what you do. The band started playing something slow. People drifted toward the dance floor. Conversations broke off into smaller clusters. The lights dimmed just enough to make everyone look a little softer, a little more expensive. That's when I heard it. I'd stood up to grab another drink from a passing tray and was about to sit back down when I realized Carter and Lila had shifted their chairs closer to the woman with the building name last name. They thought I'd stepped away. I was half turned, not really in or out of the circle. "I mean, it's cute," Lila was saying in that same soft, bubbly voice. "But it's so obvious he's not, you know, from our world." I felt, more than saw, the little tilt of her head in my direction. "Well, Alan likes to promote from the bottom," the other woman replied. "It's his big philosophy. Meritocracy and all that." Carter snorted. "Meritocracy is great until the low-educated ones start thinking they're on the same level," he said. "Put a safety vest in a tux, and he still looks like he should be changing the light bulbs." They laughed, all three of them. It wasn't a big evil villain laugh. It was casual, bored, like they were commenting on the weather, like it was just an observation everybody would obviously agree with. My ears went hot. For a second the room went a little blurry at the edges, like the chandeliers were swinging harder than they really were. I stood there, holding a glass I suddenly didn't want, listening to people who'd never worked a 12-hour shift in their lives reduce everything I'd done to a costume change, low-educated. You'd think, at 34, after everything I've seen on job sites and in offices, it wouldn't hit that hard, that I'd be used to the little digs, the quiet surprise when I speak in full sentences, the way people look relieved when I know Excel as well as I know a torquey wrench. But there's something about hearing it laid out that plainly, that cleanly while you're sitting at their table because you've earned the invitation, and realizing they still see you as someone who wandered in from the service entrance. I could have walked away. I should have. Instead, I set my glass down, pulled my chair back in, and sat. Lila's smile froze when she realized I'd been there the whole time. The color rose in her cheeks, but she didn't apologize. Carter didn't even look embarrassed. He just leaned back, loosened his tie, and smirked like he was waiting to see if I'd bark. "I didn't know we were doing evaluations tonight," I said calmly. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "Should I be taking notes?" The woman with the building name last name looked like she wanted to sink under the table. "Grant, that's not what we meant," Lila cut in quickly. "We were just saying it's impressive, how you got here without the usual route." Carter raised an eyebrow. "Relax, man," he said. "It was a joke. Blue collar, white collar, same team." "I must have missed the funny part," I said. There was a beat of silence. The band played on. Someone laughed too loudly at a different table. A waiter glided by, pretending not to notice any of it. And then from just behind my shoulder, a voice I recognized but hadn't heard enough spoke quietly. "I must have missed it too." I turned. Alan Mercer, our CEO, was standing there with his hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. I had no idea how long he'd been there. Long enough, apparently. Carter straightened in his chair. "Dad, we were just—" Alan held up a hand without looking at him. His eyes were on me. "Grant," he said, "do you have a minute?" Alan didn't wait for my answer. He simply nodded toward the far end of the ballroom, the quiet corner near the bar where the lights were dimmer and the crowd thinned out. I followed him, aware of every pair of eyes trying not to look directly at us, but absolutely watching. Carter's included. He didn't speak until we were out of earshot. I didn't expect to be embarrassed by my own family tonight, Alan said, calm. Too calm. The kind of calm where every word already has weight before it leaves your mouth. I'm not embarrassed, I replied. It wasn't bravado. It was the truth. I've heard worse. He studied me long enough that I started to wonder if I'd said something wrong. Then he shook his head slightly. That's not the point, he said. You shouldn't have to hear it at all. A waiter walked by. Alan plucked a glass of water from the tray and handed it to me like we were two regular guys at a bar. I didn't know what to say, so I took it. Come with me, he said again. This time he led me out of the ballroom entirely, down a hallway lined with framed photos of past CEOs, shaking hands with people in suits from decades before I was born. We stepped into a quieter reception area, empty except for a couch and a potted plant that had definitely seen better days. He didn't sit. He stood with his back to the window, hands clasped lightly, not in a corporate way, but almost considerate. Grant, he began, I've been observing your work for the past year, closely. That caught me off guard. I didn't realize. You weren't supposed to, he said, but your name came up too often for it to be coincidence. On-time projects, clean reports, crews that actually respect you. That last one is rarer than you'd think. He paused. Not dramatically, just long enough to make sure I heard him. You've built a reputation, he continued. A real one, the kind you can't fake. I wasn't sure what he wanted me to say, so I defaulted to the truth. I try to do the job right. He gave a small, approving nod. Good. That's exactly why I need you on something. Those words didn't land softly. They hit like someone pulling a tarp off a machine I didn't know I'd been building toward. A new project, he said. Large-scale, cross-department, highly visible. And I'm not assigning it to someone with a last name that opens doors. I'm assigning it to the person who can actually get it done. I blinked. Sir, respectfully, your team has senior managers. He cut me off with a look, not harsh, just decisive. You think I call people out of ballrooms because I'm unsure of my decisions? I swallowed. No, sir. Good, because I'm not. He stepped closer, lowering his voice like he was handing me a secret. You're leading the Centennial Infrastructure Initiative, effective Monday. My breath caught. That initiative had been whispered about for months. Multi-city contracts, long-term planning, a budget big enough to build a small airport. People expected it to go to someone from the Mercer inner circle, usually Carter. Sir, I started, but nothing after that formed into a real sentence. Alan put a hand on my shoulder. Not friendly, not patronizing, just firm. I'm choosing competence, he said, and I'm done pretending the company exists to give my family something to do. A strange pressure formed behind my ribs, something between disbelief and something dangerously close to pride. Before I could answer, before I could thank him or question him, or tell him I wasn't the guy who belonged in rooms like this, he added quietly, and Grant. Whatever they said back there, don't hold it. People who live off inherited ladders forget what climbing feels like. Something in me loosened, not fully, but enough. Thank you, I said. I won't waste it. I know, he replied simply. That's why you have it. He walked me back toward the ballroom, and just before we re-entered the noise and music and clinking glasses, he paused. One more thing, he said. You'll get pushback, not from employees, from them. He didn't specify who them was. He didn't have to. But remember this, he continued. I didn't give them the job. I gave you the job. Let them be offended. Let them be loud. You just work. He stepped inside. I hesitated a second, then followed. Carter noticed us first. His expression tightened, somewhere between confusion and annoyance. Lila gave me a brittle smile, the kind you give a neighbor whose dog just dug up your flower bed. Alan walked straight to the stage as the MC finished introducing the next award. He whispered something. The MC blinked, nodded, stepped aside. Alan took the mic. Every conversation in the room faded into silence. I'll be brief, he said. "Tonight is about recognizing the people who drive this company forward." He scanned the room. His eyes found me for half a second. I felt it. And some of those people aren't the ones on this stage. Some aren't wearing the most expensive ties. Some learned their craft the long way, not the easy way. My pulse kicked, a little too fast. "In that spirit," he continued, "I'd like to congratulate Grant Walker, who will be leading our Centennial Initiative beginning next week." A ripple went through the room, a mix of applaud, first, ask later reactions, and stunned silence. My ears rang. I stood because everyone at my table had turned toward me. Carter looked like he'd bitten into something sour. Lila's smile collapsed in real time. I didn't make a speech. I didn't walk to the stage. I wasn't invited to. Alan simply nodded in my direction, and the applause grew again. It wasn't a big gesture. It was bigger. When he left the stage, people swarmed him with congratulations. Meanwhile, half the room shifted their gaze toward me with new calculations behind their eyes. People who hadn't noticed me before suddenly remembered my name. But at my table? You could have cut the silence with a butter knife. Carter leaned back slowly, trying to rearrange his face into something neutral. He failed. "So," he said finally, "looks like our joke earlier wasn't entirely accurate." Lila punched his arm lightly, pretending to scold him. "Carter, stop." But her voice lacked conviction. I didn't look at either of them. I didn't need to. Because for the first time all night, the air around me felt level, solid, mine. But that was just the beginning, and none of us, not even Alan, knew how much that night was going to cost his family. If part 2 felt like the ground shifting beneath my feet, part 3 was the part where the fault lines finally cracked open, loudly, messily, and with enough force to rattle the entire building. The morning after the gala, the office felt different. Not for me. I'd always been the guy who clocked in, handled the emergencies, and skipped the politics. But for everyone else. When I walked into the lobby, people who usually gave me the polite, half-distracted nod suddenly looked like they were trying to solve a puzzle. A few smiled too warmly. A couple avoided eye contact completely. Recognition is strange. It can feel like light. It can also feel like heat. By noon, the rumors had outrun me across 5 departments. "Did you hear? He's the new lead. He doesn't even have a degree. He must have something on the CEO. No, the CEO hates his own son, haven't you heard? Maybe it's a diversity thing, like class diversity." That last one actually made me laugh, but beneath the noise, something darker started brewing. The Mercer family was not taking the announcement well. I didn't see Carter that whole day, but the silence around his floor was too intentional to be accidental, like everyone was waiting for a storm that hadn't yet hit land. It didn't take long. 3 days later, the first hit arrived disguised as feedback. A senior analyst, someone who reported directly to Carter, sent a 14-page email picking apart my project strategy line by line. The subject line read, "Concerns about leadership readiness." I read it twice. It wasn't concerns. It wasn't feedback. It was sabotage wrapped in formatting. And he hadn't sent it to me privately. He'd CC'd half the executive team. I answered with a clean, precise report, showing exactly why each point was incorrect, outdated, or based on assumptions that hadn't been true for 5 years. I didn't insult him. I didn't get emotional. I didn't get petty. I just did what I've always done. Work. He didn't reply. Instead, 2 days later, someone pulled the permits request for my project off the system without warning, without a timestamp, without a trace. My entire schedule stalled for 48 hours. It said it must have been accidental. Uh-huh. Then a misplaced file delayed the materials order. Then someone forgot to book the surveyors. Then an inspector showed up at the wrong site because the address in the internal memo had been updated. Things don't go wrong like that by coincidence. Not in that pattern, not with that precision. They were trying to bury me under paperwork until I failed. For the first time in my career, I wasn't fighting the project. I was fighting people. But I didn't fold. I documented everything. Every weird delay, every missing request, every accident. And strangely, the more they pushed, the calmer I became. When you've grown up solving problems with your own two hands, games like these don't scare you. They irritate you. Still, something felt off. Too coordinated, too clean, too familiar. And then it finally clicked. It wasn't employees doing this, it was the Mercer family, specifically the two who had the most to lose, Carter and his cousin Blake, both of whom had expected the Centennial Initiative to fall neatly into their laps like everything else in their lives. They weren't trying to embarrass me, they were trying to make me quit. But that didn't stop me. Stats updated, schedules recalculated, crews reorganized. Every time they cut one of my lines, I rerouted around it. Every time they threw up a wall, I built a ladder. By week 4, the cracks in their plan were showing, and that's when the real chaos hit. It was a Thursday, a long one, the kind where the fluorescent lights feel harsher than usual, and the coffee tastes burnt no matter where you buy it. I'd been reviewing blueprints in the empty conference room when Alan called. Not emailed, not texted, called. "Grant," he said, voice low, "I need you in my office. Now." There was no anger in his tone, no urgency either, just controlled pressure, the kind you hear right before a firing. I walked in expecting the worst. What I didn't expect was this. Alan sitting at his desk, a stack of printed reports spread out like pieces of a crime scene, his legal counsel standing near the window, the head of HR sitting rigidly in a chair, and on the other side of the room, Carter and Blake, both pale, both stiff, both very, very silent. Alan motioned for me to sit. I didn't. I stayed standing. He slid a folder toward me. Inside were the accidents, the lost files, the system errors, all time-stamped, all traced, all leading back to 2 accounts. Their accounts. I felt the room tilt, not because I was shocked, but because everything suddenly made sense. "This," Alan said quietly, "has been going on for weeks. We found additional correspondence, instructions, approvals, coordinated sabotage." My stomach tightened. Not fear. Something heavier. They tried to discredit you, undermine the project, and... He paused, jaw tightening. Compromise the Centennial Initiative's timeline. Carter finally spoke. "I was trying to protect the company." "No," Alan snapped, more steel in his voice than I'd ever heard. "You were trying to protect your ego." The room went dead still. Blake tried to speak, but Alan raised a hand. "You two thought I wouldn't notice. Or worse, you thought I wouldn't care." His voice lowered. "Did you think I didn't understand why you were doing this? Did you think I wouldn't see exactly who you were the moment Grant was announced?" Blake swallowed hard. "It was just a mistake." "A mistake repeated 17 times over 4 weeks isn't a mistake," Alan said. "It's intent." Then he turned to me. "Grant, I owe you an apology." I didn't speak. I couldn't. Not with the air so thick you could have carved it. "You weren't chosen to make a point," he continued. "You were chosen because you were the only qualified person in the room, and you've done nothing but prove me right." Something hot pricked behind my eyes. Not tears, just pressure I wasn't expecting. Alan stood. "Effective immediately," he said, voice steady. "Both of you are suspended pending full review of misconduct and breach of internal policy." Carter inhaled sharply. "Dad," Alan didn't look at him. "You built nothing," he said. "You earned nothing. And the moment someone did, you tried to destroy it." Silence, cold and clean. Then Alan looked back at me. "This isn't over. Not tonight. Not this week." He exhaled. "But I promise you something, Grant. I won't let this be swept under the rug. The next steps happen at the annual general meeting. Publicly." I froze. A public reckoning. A corporate bloodletting. A consequence. And as I stood there, looking at the 2 men who'd spent their lives, assuming everyone else lived beneath them, something inside me shifted. Not anger. Not triumph. Just clarity. If they thought the gala was the moment everything changed, they were wrong. This was. And the meeting, that was going to be the hammer. The annual general meeting wasn't supposed to feel like Judgment Day. It was usually just numbers, applause, charts no one actually read, a catered lunch, and executives pretending they were the backbone of the company. But that morning, the air buzzed like static before a lightning strike. Employees filled the auditorium. Department heads shifted in their seats. Investors leaned forward like they already smelled drama. And the Mercer family, what remained of them, sat in the front row with faces so tight you could have carved statues out of them. I stood in the wings, not on stage, not behind Alan, just out of the way. That's where I'd always been. It felt fitting. Except this time, the room wasn't ignoring me. They were waiting. Alan took the stage when the clock hit 10. No introduction, no polite joke, no easing in. He adjusted the mic. He scanned the room. And he started talking. Not about growth, not about numbers, not about innovation or long-term vision. He started with accountability. For the last 74 years, he said, this company has been run by people who believed the name on the building meant something. A ripple went through the room, quiet but undeniable. But in the past year, Alan continued, I've been reminded that the name on a building means nothing if the people inside forget what the work is. He clicked a remote. A slide appeared behind him. Centennial Infrastructure Initiative. Status review. Another click. Internal incidents report. Findings. Carter's posture stiffened. Blake's jaw clenched. A couple of board members leaned forward like hungry wolves. Alan kept his eyes on the crowd. A project of this scale requires integrity, he said. Coordination, respect, and most importantly, competence. His voice sharpened. Some of you sabotage that. Gas. Murmurs. Someone whispered, Jesus Christ. He clicked again. Emails, logs, time-stamped entries, all projected onto a 30-foot screen like crime scene evidence. For weeks, Alan said, members of this company intentionally derailed workflow, misdirected resources, altered internal documents, and attempted to undermine project leadership. He paused. No, not members. Family. The room froze. Literal silence. No coughs. No shifting chairs. Not even breathing. Carter's face drained to chalk. Blake hunched as if shrinking could make him invisible. This company is not a playground for nepotism, Alan continued, and it will not be a refuge for those who believe their bloodline excuses their behavior. There it was, the line, the break, the moment everything snapped. Alan looked down at the two men who should have been sitting with pride, but instead looked like schoolboys caught vandalizing their own house. Therefore, he said, as of this morning, Carter Mercer is removed from managerial duties. Blake Mercer is terminated effective immediately. All family governance privileges are suspended indefinitely. All departmental oversight is reassigned to independent leadership. Gasps. A few sharp inhales. Someone actually dropped a pen. You don't fire your own family in public. Not in a company this size. Not in a room this full. Not unless you mean it. Carter stood up. Dad, you can't. Alan didn't raise his voice. He just turned. I can, and I am. The room went so quiet, it felt like we were underwater. Sit down, Alan said. And for the first time in his adult life, Carter listened. Then Alan did something I did not expect. He stepped aside from the podium and motioned to me. Grant, he said, would you join me for a moment? Every head turned. My stomach didn't drop. My heart didn't race. I didn't feel overwhelmed. I just walked. Because for the first time in months, maybe years, I knew exactly who I was and exactly what I'd done. I stood beside him. This man, Alan said, had every reason to quit, every reason to walk away, every reason to let this company rot from the inside like many before him have chosen to do. I swallowed. He didn't, Alan continued. He documented, he reported, he rebuilt, he led. And when people tried to drag him down, he didn't retaliate. He worked. He turned to me, voice softer. You represent what this company was always meant to be. I didn't know what to say. Luckily, he kept talking. As of today, he announced to the entire auditorium, Grant Walker is appointed permanent director of the Centennial Initiative. A wave of applause erupted. Real applause, not polite corporate clapping. People stood, a few whistled, and I swear someone in the back yelled, "About time!" But I didn't smile. Not because I wasn't grateful, not because I wasn't relieved, but because something in me finally settled. Like a heavy load I didn't know I'd been carrying, just slid off my shoulders. Alan shook my hand, firm, steady, respectful. Then he wrapped the meeting. The lights came up. People began whispering, some wide-eyed, some shocked, some thrilled. The Mercer family ghosted out of the room like shadows. I stayed by the stage, letting the noise wash around me. No spotlight, no victory pose, just quiet. A calm I hadn't felt in months, maybe years. That evening I drove home without turning on the radio. Let the silence do the work. When I unlocked my front door, the house smelled like wood and a trace of detergent. My space, my air, my life. I took off my jacket, hung it neatly, and sat by the kitchen window with a glass of water. No ceremony, no celebration, just a man and his thoughts. And the truth? It wasn't triumph I felt. It was peace. The kind that doesn't shout. The kind that doesn't demand. The kind that simply is. The Mercer family had yelled at shadows for years. They thought silence was weakness. They thought status was strength. But real strength? Real strength is working while people whisper. Real strength is standing when people expect you to bow. Real strength is letting your actions answer things your words never could. And that night, sitting alone in my kitchen, I realized something simple but entirely true. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need applause. I didn't need them to regret anything. I just needed to live a life where their opinions didn't matter. And now I had it. I turned off the kitchen light, walked down the hall, opened the window to let in the cool night air. Peace doesn't announce itself. It just arrives when you finally stop chasing rooms that were never built for you.